President, I ask that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I have high hopes that in the days immediately ahead, the Senate will proceed to consideration of the Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act of 2012. I'm pleased to report to my colleagues that the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee has produced an excellent bill, the product of nearly a full year of bipartisan collaboration and good faith negotiation. The bill reauthorizes critically important FDA user fee agreements and systematically modernizes FDA's medical product authority to help boost American innovation and ensure that patients have access to the therapies they need. Mr. President, in this era of often extreme partisanship and legislative gridlock, this bill is truly a refreshing exception. And that is why I am hopeful and confident that there will be no objection here on the floor to moving to this bill next week. Frankly, all of us on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee are proud not only of the bill, but of the remarkable bipartisan process that produced it. I'm especially grateful to the committee's ranking member, Senator Enzi, for his own insistence on a bipartisan process and for his leadership in moving this very complex legislation forward. In my brief time this afternoon, I'd like to review the bipartisan process at every step marked by openness and transparency that produced this legislation. More than 1 year ago, beginning in early 2011, for some issues, my office and the Office of Ranking Member Enzi convened 6 bipartisan Help Committee working groups. Each working group was tasked with developing consensus policy proposals on key issues such as drug shortages and the integrity of the drug supply chain. These bipartisan working groups met weekly and in many cases biweekly over the whole course of 2011, discussing and developing draft consensus proposals. While this consensus process was ongoing, my staff would often meet many times a week with staffers representing both Democratic and Republican members of the Help Committee. As I said, every single working group was bipartisan, and staff from my office worked closely with Ranking Member Enzi's office to solicit priorities from other members of the committee. In many cases, we invited all Help offices to join the groups. We even invited staff of non-committee members who have been leaders in a particular policy area to join the groups. For example, our bipartisan drug shortage working group had staff members from 18 Senate offices, including the staffers for 2 senators who were not even members of the committee. While developing the consensus drafts, each of these bipartisan working groups met with key stakeholders throughout the year to solicit their input. For example, the Drug Supply Chain Integrity Working Group met with more than 40 stakeholders over a period of 9 months. In addition to the working group meetings beginning in late 2011, my staff met twice a week for almost 18 weeks with all Democratic Help offices to brief them on the reauthorization process and to update them on the progress of all of the policy proposals. To further engage committee members, the administration, stakeholders, and the public, we held a total of 5 full committee hearings on the user fee reauthorization held over the last year. After our first public hearing in July of 2011, we held 3 hearings on distinct policy issues surrounding the user fees, as well as a hearing on the actual user fee agreements. As a result of the excellent work of these bipartisan working groups, in March of this year, my staff and Ranking Member Enzi's staff released 5 bipartisan consensus drafts and solicited further stakeholder input. Bipartisan staff conducted stakeholder briefings on the release of each draft, and the drafts were available on the Help website for more than 3 weeks prior to markup. In response to the 5 discussion drafts released to the public, our staff received more than 160 comments and held more than 30 stakeholder meetings on a bipartisan basis over 3.5 weeks. Bipartisan staff worked to incorporate stakeholder feedback into the drafts, and then the committee publicly released a manager's package on Wednesday, April the 18th, 1 week before markup. On April 25th of this year, the committee met to consider the bill. Committee members voted nearly unanimously by voice vote to send the bill to the full Senate. So, Madam President, as I said, this entire process has been a model of bipartisanship, openness, and transparency. Believe me, it was tough to achieve consensus on many of the complex and controversial provisions in the bill. At every step, it required difficult and sometimes painful compromise. Even as the committee chair, I did not get some of my highest priority proposals, since I could not get consensus among members and stakeholders. Compromise and sometimes sacrifice were essential. I was acutely aware, as were other members of the committee, that it is imperative that we pass the user fee agreements in this bill. We were determined not to allow partisanship to slow this package down or to jeopardize our goal of consensus. Madam President, as I said, the end result is an excellent bill. In addition to authorizing the critically important FDA user fee agreements, this legislation makes it possible for the FDA to keep pace with ever-changing biomedical landscape. And so here is some of the major provisions of the FDA Safety and Innovation Act, which will be on the floor next week. It authorizes key user fee agreements to ensure timely approval of medical products. We streamline the device approval process while enhancing patient protections. We modernize FDA's Global Drug Supply Chain Authority. We spur innovation and incentives for drug development for life-threatening conditions. The bill reauthorizes and improves incentives for pediatric trials. It helps prevent and mitigate drug shortages, and it increases FDA's accountable and, very importantly, its transparency. So, Madam President, with this bipartisan bill, I think that we have a bill I hope that we can all support and that we can move it forward expeditiously. Neither Democrats nor Republicans got everything they wanted. On every issue, we sought consensus. And where we could not achieve consensus, we did not allow our differences to deflect us from the critically important goal of producing a bill that everyone could support. As a result, this is a truly bipartisan bill, and it's broadly supported by the patient groups and industry. This is a chart just showing we have over 100 different associations and groups, patient groups, consumer groups, pharmaceutical groups, research organizations all over America that have come out in support of this legislation. So everyone from the pharmaceutical industry, your drugstores, research institutions, consumer organizations, all now have supported this bill to reauthorize our user fee agreements. And I'm very pleased that today the Obama administration issued an official statement of administration policy asserting that, quote, the administration strongly supports passage of S. 3187. Lastly, let me mention that the Congressional Budget Office scored the bill as fully paid for, estimates that the legislation would reduce the deficit by $363 million over the next 10 years. So again, not only are we enhancing patients' rights and protections, we're ensuring a better integrity for the drug supply chain. As we know, more than 80% of the products that go into our drugs manufactured in this country come from abroad. There have been many stories written, many television investigative stories included, on problems in that drug supply chain. Well, this bill enhances our ability to ensure the integrity of that drug supply chain from where they get the raw materials to where they put it together in this country. And so this bill, as I said, is not only does it do good for our patients, we enhance FDA's authority to streamline and make sure that we bring drugs to market in more rapid order. and we saved $363 million over 10 years doing it. So I look forward to bringing the FDA Safety and Innovation Act to the floor in a few days. The House has had a similar bipartisan process. They're scheduled to take up their version of the bill also next week. If the Senate acts quickly, I'm confident that we can go to conference, get a final bill on the President's desk this summer. To that end, as I said, I am hopeful and confident we can move without objection to consideration of the bill. It's important that we do so. This is absolutely must-pass legislation. It's critically important to the FDA, to the industry, and to our patients to get this done. So I urge all of my colleagues to join in the bipartisan spirit of cooperation that we have engineered and witnessed in the Health Committee over the last year. Let us come together, Democrats and Republicans alike. Let's get this legislation on the floor, pass it, which is of such critical importance to the American people. Madam President, with that, I yield the floor and note the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Quorum call in the Senate as members have been working on a number of issues. Earlier today, they voted to approve 2 new members to the Federal Reserve Board. They've also debated a motion to begin work on a bill reauthorizing the Food and Drug Administration, something most Senate watchers are saying has wide bipartisan support and should pass fairly easily. Unexpectedly, the Senate decided to take up a measure creating new sanctions against Iran. It was expected to be approved by unanimous consent, but a number of senators are objecting to the measure, claiming that they haven't had time to read it. According to an article in CQ today, among some of the new items that are in the bill are new sanctions targeting companies that engage in or support censorship in Iran, a provision supported by Illinois Republican Mark Stephen Kirk, also language backed by New Jersey Democrat Robert Menendez concerning the jamming of satellite communications by Iran. An additional provision would target human rights violators in that country. Language stating that the bill is not an authorization of the use of military force was to be included in a manager's amendment at the request of Kentucky Republican Rand Paul. Senator Lindsey Graham vociferously opposed that change without language saying that the military force is on the table. And that's one of the main holdups to this UC moving forward. In the meantime, the House has just passed a suspension bill expressing the sense of the House regarding the importance of preventing the government of Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapons capability. As amended, House members have just begun working on their nearly 140 amendments to the Defense Appropriations Bill. The House expected to continue working on those amendments until late tonight, and you can see that debate live right now at C-SPAN and on cspan.org.
Madam President.
The senator from Oklahoma.
I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call in progress be vitiated.
Without objection.
Madam President, it's my understanding that there could be some coming down from the other side who want to speak, and so I just ask that I be recognized for up to 15 minutes as if in morning business.
Without objection.
All right. Madam President, today I want to expose a far-left environmental agenda that's being imposed upon the Department of Defense by President Obama and a lot of his allies, and it comes at the same time that the Obama administration is focusing on dramatically reduced cuts in the military. Now, as ranking member of the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works and as a senior member of the Armed Services Committee, stopping the radical global warming agenda as well as President Obama's devastating cuts to our military have been the top priorities. That's all I've been talking about for the last couple of months. Now, I've had a growing concern about how President Obama's global warming agenda is harming our military, but the remarks recently made by Secretary Panetta had led me to come here and kind of make a few statements. First of all, let me say this about Secretary Panetta. I served with him for 5 years over in the House, and a number of years ago, he and I became very close friends. In fact, I rejoiced when he was nominated and we confirmed him as Secretary of Defense. And so I was extremely disappointed to see that he was wasting his valuable time perpetrating the President's global warming fantasies and his war on affordable energy, which occurred no less at a gathering of radical environmentalists. That's where the statement was made. Secretary Panetta said, and I quote, "In the 21st century, reality is that there are environmental threats that constitute threats to our national security," and vowed that the Pentagon will take a leading role in shifting the way that the way that the U.S. uses its energy. Every talking point that Secretary Panetta used in his speech, from rising sea levels to severe droughts to the so-called plight of the polar bear, all of these, I won't go into them one at a time, these all came right out of Al Gore's science fiction movie, and they've all been totally rebuked, totally. In reality, it is President Obama's war on affordable energy that's having a dramatic impact on our national security, a war that is further depleting an already stretched military budget and putting our troops at risk. Secretary Panetta made another revealing statement in justifying the President's green agenda, as The Hill reported, and I'm going to quote this now, Madam President. This was just about 2 editions ago in The Hill magazine. Quote, "As oil prices continue to skyrocket, the Department now faces a shortfall exceeding $3 billion of higher than expected fuel costs this year. According to Panetta, in order to dig its way out of that financial hole, DOD has no choice but to look to alternative fuel technologies. The Pentagon officials plan to invest more than $1 billion into developing those technologies in fiscal year 2013. I might add, that's $1 billion that would otherwise be spent on defending America. That's right. Energy prices have skyrocketed. We understand that, precisely because of the politics of this administration. Remember, they have openly admitted, the Secretary of Energy Secretary Stephen Chu said that, quote, "Somehow we have to figure out how to boost the price of gasoline to the levels in Europe." And we all know why he made that statement. That was way back in 2008. And it was Obama's statement that said, quote, "Under his cap and trade," which is what they've been talking about, electricity prices would necessarily skyrocket. Now, because domestic energy prices have skyrocketed under his administration, just as they wanted them to do, Secretary Panetta wants the military to go green instead of spending scarce resources greening the military. The common sense solution is simple, to begin developing our own vast supply of energy resources. Now, Secretary Panetta's comments came just 2 weeks before the Senate Armed Services Committee is to begin the markup, the beginning of this coming year's defense authorization bill. So I'll be taking this opportunity to work with my colleagues on the committee to put the spotlight on President Obama's forcing his costly green agenda on the Department of Defense while he is taking down the budget for the defense. I look forward to introducing a number of amendments that will put a stop to this nonsense and help ensure that Secretary Panetta has the tools that he needs. I can assure you that, because I know him well, that this is a script this came off of. Now, as part of that effort, I'm also releasing a document put together by the Congressional Research Service that puts a price tag on how much the federal government provides global warming policies, and I'll be discussing this. With President Obama running for re-election and pretending to be for all of the above energy approach, Secretary Panetta's comments are surprising, but they are still also illuminating. President Panetta, in his commitment for $1 billion of alternative fuels, makes that clear. Despite the President's recent change in rhetoric for his re-election campaign, he remains fully determined to implement his all-out attack on traditional American energy development, and the military is one place where he can force that experiment. We're talking about a green experiment using our military. Now, to show just how egregious this whole thing is, let me spend just a second here documenting how badly President Obama wants to take down the military for the benefit of his green agenda. Over the past 4 years, DOD has been forced to drastically cut its personnel, the number of the brigade combat teams, tactical fighters, aircraft, airlift capabilities. It's eliminating or postponing programs such as the C-17, the C-27, the Global Hawk, the Block 30, the C-130 avionics package, which we desperately need, and the modernization and the advancement of the F-35. These are programs that we have had on the drawing board, and it's very important that we carry these through to fruition. Now, even more concerning, these cuts could go even deeper because the subcommittee failed to report legislation last fall, and we all remember this. It would have reduced the deficit by at least $1.2 trillion over the next 10 years. The Pentagon's budget could be cut by an additional $495 billion between 2013 and 2021. Now, that is very interesting because during that period of time, we're talking about two things, not just degrading the military, but over the next 10 years, taking $500 billion out, and if sequestration should come in, that would be another $500 billion, and everyone realizes that would be devastating to the military. Now, Secretary Panetta has rightly warned us that such cuts are going to be a threat to national security. He said, and I'll quote him now, he said, "Unfortunately, while large cuts are being imposed, the threats to national security would not be reduced. As a result, we would have to formulate a new security strategy that accepted substantial risk of not meeting our defense needs. A sequestration budget is not one I could recommend." That's a quote by Secretary Panetta. And the General Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he weighed in also. He said, quote, "The impact of sequestration is not only in its magnitude, it's in what it does. We lose control. And as we lose control, we'll become out of balance and we won't have the military this nation needs." And when they talk about accepting risk, we're talking about lives. That's what that means. Risk equals lives. What are you willing to do for this green agenda? The remarks by the top DOD officials make Panetta's recent global warming speech at odds with solving our military's budget problems. Even as Secretary Panetta expresses concern about the impact of these cuts on national security, he is openly supporting President Obama's forcing DOD to expend large amounts of scarce resources on expensive alternative fuels. This doesn't make any sense, and that's why I believe Secretary Panetta's global warming remarks were written by someone in the White House to appease the radical left and not Secretary Panetta. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And after seeing how severe these cuts to DOD will be, how can anyone justify this so-called greening of the military? Consider, for example, the Navy's plan to sail its Green Fleet, a strike group powered by alternative fuels, by 2016. The success of this Green Fleet is predicated upon biofuel. Much of it is algae-based, becoming practical and affordable. They're assuming that that's going to happen, which I don't believe it will happen. In 2009, the Department of Navy paid $424 a gallon for 20,000 gallons of biodiesel made from algae, which would set a record for all-time cost of fuel. Now, we're talking about that's per gallon, and that was on the market for $4 a gallon. and it's $424 a gallon. In December 2011, the Navy purchased 450,000 gallons of biofuel at $12 a gallon, $12 million. That works out about $26 a gallon. This purchase is part of a larger deal in which the Navy has pledged taxpayer funds of $170 million as their share of a $510 million effort to construct or retrofit biofuel refineries in order to create commercially viable market. This biofuel will be mixed with conventional fuels by 50-50 ratio to yield a blend that will cost roughly $15 a gallon, so roughly 4 times what we should have to be spending. Now, keep in mind, this is the same time we're rejecting systems that were in our plans and have been for a long period of time. As if the services are not already stressed by serious budget cuts, the Secretary of the Navy will also direct the Navy and Marine Corps to produce or consume 1 gigawatt of new renewable energy to power naval installations across the country. Not everyone agrees that energy efficiency in the military is a worthy goal. In fact, I have been a strong supporter of the DoD's alternative energy solutions that are affordable and that make sense, including the initiatives of non-algae biofuels and natural gas. In fact, in my state of Oklahoma, we are working through the major universities, the Nobel Foundation, and others to take that leadership role. But forcing our military to take money away from core programs in order to invest in unproven technologies as part of a failed cap-and-trade agenda is not only wrong, it's reckless. I'm not alone in saying this. My good friend Senator McCain agrees with me on this point. Just last month, Senator McCain criticized earmarks for alternative energy research in the defense appropriation bills, which cost the taxpayers $120 million. Senator McCain said, and I'm quoting him now, "We're talking about cutting the Army by 100,000 people, the Marines by 80,000 people, and yet we now have our armed services in the business of advanced alternative energy research. The role of the armed forces in the United States is not to engage in energy research. The job of energy research should be that of the Department of Energy. That's where it belongs." And I agree with Senator McCain's statement. The CRS report is significant, largely due to my concern about green spending in the military. I recently asked the CRS to figure out how much money, how much taxpayers' dollars are actually going to, are being used to advance the green agenda. The amount came out of since 2008, $68.4 billion has been used to advance a green agenda. Now, just to name a few options, we could add, if we didn't do that, we could add $12.1 billion to maintain DoD procurement at fiscal levels of 2012 and allow our military to continue to modernize its fleet of ships, its aircraft, its ground vehicles. We could avoid a delay in the Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine replacement program, and it goes on, which I'll have as a part of the record. Instead of funding these priorities, the Department of Defense has been forced to spend valuable resources on research related to climate change and renewable energy. In the stimulus package, each branch of the armed services and the President and the Pentagon itself was given $75 million, a total of $300 million to research, development, test, and evaluate projects that advance energy-efficient programs. In total, since 2008, DoD has spent at least $4 billion on climate change and energy-efficient activities. The same $4 billion could have been used to purchase 30 brand-new F-35 Joint Strike Fighters, 28 new F-22 Raptors, or completely pay for the C-130 avionics program that we've been working on for a long period of time. Now, just for a minute, I'll turn to the argument President Obama and the far left have been using to justify this mission to go green. They always say that we need a transition away from fossil fuels. Well, you know, one thing that we do know, and it is a fact, we have, and I don't think there's anyone out there who's disagreeing or arguing with this, we have more reserves in oil, gas, and coal than any other. These are recoverable reserves I'm talking about, any other country in the world. And when you stop and you think about what we've been talking about on this war that this administration has had on fossil fuels, it's been that on domestic energy. One thing people understand, there's not a person in this body or anyone else that I've found in America that didn't learn back in the elementary days about supply and demand. So we have all this vast supply, but government won't let us develop our own supply. And it's something that is it's ludicrous. We're the only country in the world where that's a problem. So now, in addition to the fact that we cannot use our resources develop our own resources, we keep hearing over and over again what people are saying. They're saying, well, if we were to even open up our public lands to development, to drilling and to producing, it would take 10 years before that would reach the pump. I know my time is real short here, so I'm having to shortcut this, but I talked to one of the top guys in producing today. His name is Harold Hamm. Harold Hamm was from Oklahoma. He actually was up in North Dakota right now, and he's doing incredible things in developing shale and developing gas and oil to run this country. And so we have now, when people, I asked them the question, I said, yes, thank you very much. I said, I'm going to use your name in quoting, how long would it take if you were set up in New Mexico and all of a sudden they would lift the ban in order for that to reach the pump? What his answer was, Madam President, it was 70 days. He said it'd take 2 months to get the first barrel of oil, or the first barrel of oil up, and then it only takes 10 days to go through the refining process and reach the pump. So it's supply and demand. We have that, and we should not be using our military. And I'm going to give my whole statement as part of the record that shows how much money we are spending in the military to advance a green agenda by this president. With that, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Minnesota.
Thank you, Madam President. May I interrupt for one moment?
Yes. Senator from Rhode Island.
I just wanted to confirm that the order proceeding is going to be that Senator Franken is going to speak, and then I will speak for a few moments after Senator Franken. And I know that the presiding officer is to be excused very shortly.
Senator would like to speak now.
I will ask consent that I follow Senator Franken, and we will see to it that the presiding officer is relieved timely at 4 o'clock.
Without objection.
Great. Thank you. I thank the senator from Rhode Island. Madam President, last week my colleagues on the other side of the aisle blocked a vote that would have eased the burden of debt for millions of college students in Minnesota and across the country. My Republican friends disagreed with us about the best way to pay for this legislation, so a minority of senators kept us from helping millions of families and taking a step toward keeping our nation's workforce globally competitive. But, Madam President, this debate isn't just about helping students pay for college. I want to talk a little bit about the two competing proposals to pay for this critical legislation. I'd like to talk about our national priorities and our national values. Now, on one side, the Democratic proposal would close a loophole that allows some of the wealthiest Americans to avoid paying taxes that they should owe to the federal government. This fix would only apply, our fix would only apply to Americans making over $250,000 a year and would not create any new taxes on businesses or individuals. It would just close a loophole that allows high-income people to get out of paying taxes that everyone else in America is already expected to pay. Okay, this is what it is. You see, some people making a lot of money talk to their accountants and tax lawyers who had figured out that the law was written in such a way that you could use an S corporation to get around paying some of your payroll taxes. Payroll taxes are your Social Security taxes and your Medicare taxes. Now, S corporations are basically a pass-through. Whatever profits your company makes, you just, at the end of the year, pass it through to you and claim it as income, and you pay regular income taxes on it. It's income. But although the law was never intended to allow this, this is the loophole. You can pay yourself an artificially low amount of money sometime earlier in the year and call that a salary, say $40,000. And thus you'll pay enough to qualify for Social Security later when you retire. And you'll only pay FICA on this amount. But then you take, at the end of the year, you take the rest of the business's profits as income. Now remember, this is considered income. Okay? But you don't pay FICA taxes on the amount. That's the loophole. You still pay income tax on it because it's income. But because of an accident in the way the law is written, this was not intended. You avoid paying FICA taxes on the part you didn't initially call salary. All of the money you pocketed, both the so-called salary and the profit at the end of the year, again, is income. It's income. It's not capital gains. So you should be paying, like everybody else, Medicare taxes on all of it and Social Security taxes on income up to $110,000, like everyone else. There's simply no excuse, no reason for not paying taxes, paying your FICA taxes on the $110 for Social Security and the rest on all your income for Medicare, except for an anomaly that was accidentally written into the code. This is exactly the type of loophole we should be closing. It's not something that Congress created intentionally for a reason, to help people buy homes or to encourage investment in research and development. There is no reason that this loophole exists. There is no purpose to it. There is no reason to keep it there. So, the Democratic legislation would close that loophole for those individuals making more than $250,000 in a year. And we would use that savings to prevent the doubling of interest that students pay on Stafford-subsidized loans. By contrast, the Republican proposal, which passed the House a few weeks ago, would eliminate the Prevention and Public Health Fund, which is our national investment in preventive health care. This proposal would undermine the health of our nation by cutting funding for cancer screenings, child immunizations, and diabetes prevention, among other things. And it would be fiscally irresponsible to boot, since according to a study for the Trust for America's Health, every dollar invested in proven community-based disease prevention programs yields a return of $5.60. My home state of Minnesota leads the country when it comes to providing high-quality, low-cost health care. So when I was elected to represent the people of Minnesota, I put together a series of roundtables with experts around Minnesota to learn more about our health care system. I heard the same thing from leading national experts at the Mayo Clinic, the University of Minnesota, from providers, from doctors, from people in public health and rural health and insurance. Everyone said the same thing. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. There is no question that if we catch cancer early, a patient will be much more likely to make a full recovery. If every child has access to immunization, we'll prevent outbreaks of infectious diseases, and our kids will grow up stronger and healthier. And if we can prevent someone from getting diabetes, they'll be healthier than if we wait until they have it and then treat them for the rest of their lives. And not only will people be healthier if we prevent disease, but we will save a lot of money too. That's why the health care law included the Prevention and Public Health Fund. The fund is already investing in community-based programs like the Diabetes Prevention Program, a program that Dick Lugar and I fought to include in the health care law. This program was pilot tested by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in St. Paul, Minnesota, and in Indianapolis. It involves structured nutrition classes for 16 weeks, and 16 weeks of exercise at community-based organizations like the YMCA with people who have pre-diabetes. And guess what? The program, the Diabetes Prevention Program, has been shown to reduce the likelihood that someone with prediabetes will be diagnosed with full-blown type 2 diabetes by nearly 60%. By nearly 60%. Those are pretty good odds. And the program doesn't just make people healthier, it also saves everyone money. The Diabetes Prevention Program, the program I just described, costs about $300 per participant, as compared to treating type 2 diabetes, which costs more than $6,500 every single year. That's why UnitedHealth, the largest private insurer in the company that happens to also be headquartered in Minnesota, is already providing the program to its beneficiaries. In fact, the CEO of UnitedHealth told me that for every dollar they invest in the Diabetes Prevention Program, they save $4 in health care later on. The money in the Prevention Public Health Program in the Affordable Care Act is there to scale up this program around the country so everybody in the country, every person who has prediabetes can have availability to it. It can be available to them. This homegrown program is exactly what the Prevention and Public Health Fund was designed to support. And it's not the only one like it. In Minnesota, the fund has gone to support tobacco cessation programs. It's helped prevent infectious diseases, and it has expanded our desperately needed primary care workforce. I think that we can all agree these are worthwhile investments. Unfortunately, many of my friends on the other side of the aisle are trying to end this important work, calling the Prevention and Public Health Fund a waste of money, or worse. And just last week, one of my colleagues on the floor inaccurately claimed that, quote, a health clinic was using the fund to spay and neuter pets. Let me take this opportunity to set the record straight. That's not true. The Department of Health that my friend accused of using prevention funds to spay pets has not and will not spend prevention fund money for this purpose. I just ask that in these debates, we really confine ourselves to facts. You know, this all comes down to priorities. My friends on the other side of the aisle would rather cut the Prevention and Public Health Fund than close a tax loophole for wealthy Americans, which serves absolutely no purpose. In fact, they would rather keep us from voting on a bill to ease the burden of debt for students across the country than close this loophole. I hear sometimes talk about closing loopholes so we can bring the marginal rate down. If you can't close this loophole, which has no purpose, I don't see any loophole that we can possibly agree to close. So I ask my friends on both sides of the aisle just one favor. Talk to your constituents. Talk to people who have been saved from the affliction of diabetes, or who have quit smoking, or who have immunized their children because of the Prevention and Public Health Fund. Talk to your state and local Department of Health, who are working to prevent outbreaks of the next dangerous strain of flu, thanks to the infectious disease prevention funding. And stand with me in support of the Prevention and Public Health Fund. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor and will yield to my friend from Rhode Island, and I know that the presiding officer may have to go, so I'll just jump in the chair for you. How's that?
Madam President.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me first thank my colleague from Minnesota for his courtesy.